Being a student, mostly an art student in Vienna, and then being Christian was already a conflict for me.
I think typically people aren't trying to offend, they aren't trying to be rude at all.
So in the past, if people were judged based on the color of their skin, maybe in the future people could be judged because they have religious beliefs.
What is self-censorship? Is it affecting the way we express our beliefs? What are the root causes of this phenomenon? After reading several opinion polls and studies, one of which OIDAC Europe published in 2022, we confirmed that self-censorship was real. Among other spheres of life, the university context is one in which the problem seems to be most prevalent. So we wanted to find out if and to what extent Christian university students are affected by it.
Hey guys, Danny. Nice to meet you.
That is why we invited 9 students from different European countries, backgrounds and denominations to a weekend in Vienna. We asked them if they censor themselves and why, and what they had experienced when talking about their faith, and what they thought could be done to promote an atmosphere that enables free expression.
Hi, I'm Mary.
I'm Daniel.
I'm 16.
My name is Wouter.
My name is Valeria.
My name is Yusuf.
I'm Sarah.
My name is Marcus.
I'm Mafe.
I'm from Belfast in Northern Ireland, but I now live in Edinburgh in Scotland.
I've mainly lived in Kent, England.
I'm from France.
Brussels, Belgium.
I'm from Peru.
I'm from the northern part of Nigeria, but I currently live and study in Hungary.
I'm from Germany.
I live and study in Vienna.
I'm living right now in Alicante, Spain.
I'm studying for a degree in mathematics.
I just completed my foundation year in economics and politics in London.
International Relations and Geopolitics in Paris.
An advanced master in tax law.
I studied classical and contemporary dance in Vienna.
I did a speaker education.
My subjects are sports and history, and hopefully one day I will become a teacher.
I am studying history at the university, but I also study photography, and I am a mom.
What is the most exciting thing for you guys being on this project with people from different places?
I'm shocked because we are like from different countries, but we all like think or experiencing the same thing, and it's curious for me. Like, wow.
We're all from very different denominations as well.
Yeah,
That's true.
There's quite a common thread. I grew up in Belfast in Northern Ireland, which is quite a unique place to grow up, I guess. It's part of the UK, but it's also sort of part of Ireland. I'm an only child, so it's just me, mum and dad at home growing up, and very close family, very Christian orientated. We're from a Roman Catholic background, and I very much got my faith from my parents.
I really like to see also the different countries. Like, it's not like this national thing anymore, the topic. It's more a European topic.
I was born in America, Pennsylvania, which is where this accent comes from. And then my family moved to Kent. I grew up in a fairly protected setting, you could say, so very like-minded people around me. However, moving away from home definitely showed to me that I needed to arrive at, I guess, the Christian faith or religion sort of through my own understanding so I could properly believe in it. So that's where I'm at now. I'm considering Christianity, but also trying to come to an understanding it through my own experiences and conclusions.
I'm enjoying hearing different perspectives and also, I guess, new ideas about the topic. And yeah, of course, being in Vienna. So that's quite nice too.
That's true.
Growing up, faith was definitely a part of my life, and but I think when I came to university I really had to question it for myself rather than just going along with my parents on a Sunday and that sort of thing. So I definitely really came into my own in terms of the faith at university. When I initially arrived, I was a bit nervous to leave home, first time away, an only child, not really used to kind of fending for myself as much as maybe others had been. I just wanted to fit in, make friends.
For most of my first year, I was definitely sort of cautious.
Before I even started university, I was a bit scared, just because I had already enough bad experiences in school.
Because I was unsure, I guess, if my viewpoint from then on would still be taken with the same seriousness as it was beforehand.
I was a bit lost in the beginning. I think in my friends group, I was the only Christian.
I got the feeling it's a big topic in society, it's a big topic at university, but it's so difficult to talk about it.
I didn't really talk about my faith at least not at university.
And I thought if I start talking about my faith too early, people get put off by me. I turned up to a lecture theatre and the lecturer made it very clear from the first few lessons that he was an atheist and he was going to hammer that point. Freedom of speech is a good thing and he should be able to share that. But it became progressively worse over the weeks where it wasn't just he was saying he was an atheist, he was actively mocking people who had a belief, which was kind of just irritating, but I could let it slide. But then it became more active where he would like blaspheme images of Christ and actively target Christians. And he was demonstrating how you make a logical argument. Pretty much every example he used to do that got to the point where every example was how God doesn't exist. Or he was like, well, if God does exist, then he would make some very horrendous claims about what God could be. It was quite hurtful actually, and as an 18-year-old I didn't really know how to respond appropriately. I didn't want to stand up in a lecture theatre of 300 other people who were laughing and finding it funny, so it felt like me against the world, and I felt I very much couldn't speak out.
The first few years when I came, I actually struggled because I thought there was like an unwritten law somewhere that people just felt if you believe, then let it just be between you and your God and leave us out of it.
I was self-censoring more because I thought, well, these are all my peers, they're all agreeing with my professor. If I start saying a different opinion to my professor, they're going to laugh me as well because they were laughing at his jokes, they're going to laugh at me, it's all going to be a disaster and I'll make no friends.
I must admit to have self-censored.
I basically censed myself. Yeah.
I remember like not being like hiding it, but I definitely wasn't like openly about it.
If I recall, before I came to Europe, I felt comfortable posting about Bible scriptures all the time on my Facebook or on my WhatsApp because it's a normal thing. But when I came to Europe, you know, it wasn't really like that. And I found out that I actually had this gradual shift where right now, even if I want to share something, it's a bit, I just experience this little hesitation.
So I made very good experiences when you like have the courage to just speak out, which is a completely different perspective than the world has now in some areas.
I don't like conflict actually. I was already with this mindset of I'm just not gonna say anything.
I think it's quite French, but in France we always debate and we always discuss things.
The first thing that became apparent during the interviews was that almost all of them had experienced some form of self-censorship, either at school or university. Many had felt intimidated or afraid of talking about their Christian background with peers or professors. Our question now was why exactly they were withholding their views and beliefs.
I was born in Nigeria. I have spent pretty much all my life in Nigeria prior to arriving in Hungary, 2017. The situation in my country, or shall I say in the northern part of Nigeria, has been getting a bit bad. If there is an event that could spark some outrage, then that's when the Christians usually have to fear for their lives. On paper, we are not regarded as second-class citizens, but in the everyday life, when it comes to opportunities, then we feel like we are not being seen as equal. Listening to people always has like opened up my understanding about like a topic. I think this is what the world should learn from, coming to sit together and talk. Yeah. At least if we can do that alone, I think there will be some progress. So yeah.
Maybe next time it happens, we can get some people who with completely different opinions from ourselves, just to stimulate the debate even more.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but in my school, when I was in the high school, in a philosophy class, the teacher like asked to have like a debate about abortion. We were talking about one day about like abortion, and
I said that I was against abortion because the teacher asked us to talk about this.
And she was trying to create a conversation like this, but it turned around like to an attack because I was the only one. So it was awful for me. And then after that conversation because I was the only one. Yeah. I received a death threat. After class, she told me, I know what subway you take every day, so be careful. Yeah, so I was very scared. I went to the police, and well, the police went home with me every day for like one month. So sometimes I am scared. Yeah.
I've got quite similar experiences in university setting in Edinburgh. I'm involved with the Pro-Life Society at my university, which had difficulties even existing because the university didn't like it. The reception by the rest of the student body for the Life Society has been very hostile, to the point where we were getting death threats online, people wanting to know who was running this social media account, which was me. I want to kill the person who runs this social media account, and quite graphic descriptions of how they wanted to do so. Wasn't the best messages to be receiving. It's quite a difficult one because obviously you don't know where people's personal backgrounds have come from.
Yeah.
You don't know how closely they've been maybe affected by abortion in their personal life or their family life, so it's very hard to know how to respond compassionately with also saying the truth as well. I'm more than happy to share my beliefs, but if they're going to result in personal attacks like that, that is very difficult to face, walking around campus, people knowing who you are.
Personally, I will never like bring that topic out, because I know that it's very sensitive, but it was like a school thing, so I just had to say the thing. Yeah, so.
While a couple of students have sadly experienced serious threats or intimidating situations, it was thankfully not the predominant trend. That is why we continued looking for the real reasons why young Christians would self-censor. Could it be related to stereotypes about religion, or is it related to the media?
I came here to study dance. I would say I'm besides artistic, really extroverted person. I grew up actually in a Christian family. I think I first consciously took the decision at 16 years old.
What do you think the church from back then and currently, have we done something in a way that makes the situation worse for us? Can we say we are the architects of our problems in some certain ways? Or what do you guys think?
That's a good question.
Yeah. I think it's really normal in my generation that people want to make justice for what, for example, the Catholic Church did.
Well, Spain has a very hard background because for 40 years we had a governor that was Catholic, but really strict Catholic, and he was a, dictador. Dictator.
And I think it's great that people fight for justice. It doesn't matter from which group you are, if you were religious or non-religious, discrimination is bad.
So he kind of forced Catholicism into the society for 40 years. So that was people were like this. And then when he died, I think people went to the opposite. I kind of get them, it was very, very, very tough for them living in those years. So those parents raised their kids against God because they were against of Franco. When you say you're a Christian, they automatically go to Franco. That's why they tag you as, bad person, because he did a lot of bad things.
When you speak the truth or what you believe to be the truth, there is a way of saying it. And if your way of saying is offensive, then of course people will not like you.
Probably there are some among us Christians who have not presented the message properly out of being excessively too emotional about the message we carry.
And it is true that even Christians, even Catholic Christians, I'm talking about Catholic Christians, sometimes talk about what we believe to be true, but don't really understand why we believe it. And so in that way we can be offensive and people can dislike us.
I had Christian friends where I'm like, what you're saying is, like, I don't think it's correct.
Well, I think it depends on us because I think in the history Christians were like very like telling you what to do, you know, like you do, and not loving people. And so if we start just doing that, then they know that we are not here to judge or like to tell them what to do, just to love them as they are. I think we will like go to that direction.
And what do we believe is the first commandment that Christ gave us was love yourself and your neighbor as yourself. So if you're gonna proclaim what you think to be true, you have to do it in a way that you love your neighbor. If we really would take it seriously as Christians, then I think we will be a step further to a more inclusive society.
Talking about a lot where people finding you're either judging them or you're attacking them, the express your Christianities, I find a lot of the time that, not all the time, but quite a lot of the time that comes from people who've had bad experiences with the church, which is quite a difficult area as well to navigate because, yes, there's problems within the church and all different types of churches and institutions, but separating those individual problems from the wider faith now I think brings another aspect of it about.
Yeah, I would say it's rarely helpful to put people in boxes.
I think to fully live as a Christian or to make that conversion, I think you would be accepted, but I think it would possibly also come with some consequences. Potentially you might lose some friends who think you've suddenly become bigoted or whatever.
I often think you're not really allowed to talk a lot about faith and things at university, because otherwise you will get the stamp of conservative, and most of the time people are also associating it with right-winged things, which is not faith for me.
And they assumed, oh, if you're a Catholic, you must have these political beliefs and this political stance.
Like people would automatically ask me like, oh, are you religious? And they had all these stigmas or stereotypes about what religious people do.
A lot of people, they have in mind an image of Christians which is quite old.
Yeah, I mean, people just assume if you're a Christian, you're really boring.
Honestly, I thought Christians would be boring.
Which is not a very serious misconception, but they just think you've got no life.
I don't know, boring. I never thought I would crash into it and love it.
They're a bit boring, they're a bit strange, they're a bit wacky.
One of my roommates was actually atheist, and in the end of the year, she was just like, actually, with you, I discovered that Christian people can be cool. Yeah, because we are just like normal people, actually. We're not just like old people living in the middle age or whatever.
But I also do see how some people who weren't maybe brought up in this faith could find it quite peculiar.
This remarks she made is quite powerful because she wasn't angry against Christians. She didn't have any idea, any perceptions. I think she thought we were really extreme in our thoughts, in our ideas, in our political ideas, in our, anything. While living with me and with the other roommate, she discovered that it wasn't the case at all.
Christianity has a long history with errors and reforms. Our participants also understand the criticism towards some Christians, who sometimes can also be judgmental of others. Now, they wish to change those negative perceptions by giving a positive example. Another aspect that seems to make it difficult to talk about one's personal faith in Europe was highlighted in the discussions, namely, the feeling that nowadays religion is a topic that is only allowed to be discussed in the private sphere.
There were times that I felt, okay, except if I'm sure that I can have a conversation with this group of people and they will be objective, then I can open up.
So like, how was it for you, like when you wanted to introduce, sharing from the aspect of your faith? Did you have any struggles with that?
The main starting point mostly was a subjective one. In person, one-to-one person talks, you can talk about faith and they want to know why you're believing. And if you talk in a big hall or in a discussion group, it's getting very difficult.
Are you the same, like, for example, in your group of friends, you spoke like directly at first about your faith, or you waited a little bit?
At school or university context? University context. Yes. That's actually a pretty interesting topic, and that's more difficult in that context to stay right there. Because, most people start to feel attacked.
Yeah.
Because you sit there and you're kind of afraid of talking about these topics which are moving you inside. So the personal approach for me was an approach where I could live my faith at university as I want to live it, like authentically.
I've never really had a negative experience talking about my faith, because when I talk about it, I know that person well enough.
I think for me, it often depends like how well I know somebody. Mm-hmm. If I like just met somebody, I won't necessarily immediately start talking about my background. But after I know somebody better, I feel more sort of comfortable. It's interesting to hear what they think about Christianity, because I'm thinking about it sort of from both angles right now.
Yeah, we had a lot of discussions together, and it was really interesting because people knew, even though we were extremely different, we were all able to just discuss peacefully things. I knew the people a bit more, and people knew also who I was.
Because I find that people can be quite open to it, just depending on their experiences of the past. So
especially if you already have that friendship with them, they're not going to assume it's an attack. When I came to Scotland, it's much more secular. Christianity seemed to be a bit more of a private affair rather than something you should bring into public.
How is it for you, Walter? Like, is it almost the same situation also, or?
Well, generally, I'm at the same workplace since 16 months, and I don't think that they know that I'm Christian. I don't hide it, I just don't talk about it.
I felt like in Europe everyone preaches the message that religion is an individual thing. Religion is like the thing of the heart.
That's one thing that I think is happening also today, that people are like, believe whatever you want, but just keep it to yourself. Your artistry and your faith is separated. You do this and you're not doing with, your faith is on the side, and I think that's a no-go.
For me, in Nigeria, where I came from, yes, religion is an individual thing, is a thing of the heart, but also it was a thing of community.
Because both are part of me. My faith is part of me, my art is part of me.
Many of the students felt that society perceives religion as a private and sometimes isolated aspect of a person's identity, making it difficult for them to feel free to express their beliefs. Others felt that people just don't like the topic altogether. While faith is a very personal choice, the freedom to express their faith publicly is also an essential part of who they are, how they interact with others, and how they view the world around them.
Throughout my lifetime, I've been an atheist all the time, because there have never been a need of finding God. Then I came to a point where I really reached out for the first time to God. My question was just like, God, if you're real, then please show me. I was just searching for answers, I guess. And then he was there. So that's when the journey started. That was like a blown up experience. It was nice.
When I was at the age of 13 I kind of stopped believing, more or less. I got pretty good in sports, because that's one of my passions.
As a child, you're raised in it, but at a certain moment you have to make a choice. And for me, that was at 18 years old. I kneeled down, and suddenly it was like, okay, this is it.
It's the best way for me to be who I am.
I believe that if I do decide to become, I don't really consider my career choices or the impact to society, because that's not going to be an option, and those things are just going to not even be considered, because I feel the call or the obligation to follow Christ so strongly that sort of everything else doesn't matter.
When you have like a real encounter to Jesus, it just changed everything in your life. It's not like just a part of your life. It is your whole life. It is the center of your life.
That's how strong the feeling needs to be if you're going to make that step.
My best friend got really, really sick and made me question all these things that everyone questions, like, why does this happen? Why is so much suffering in the world? What if all my beliefs are just a build-up thing from my parents?
I went to India. I got sick, pretty sick. At the edge, I just screamed to God, I think, and I said, hey, God, if you are there, if there is a God at all, if you want me to still be alive and get well again, I could say that in my mind, only in my mind, because I couldn't speak anymore at that moment.
I think I was a bit rude to my people. Yeah, and I wasn't really aware of that.
And that's actually when God came and really touched my heart again.
The time where I was doubting myself were the biggest phases in my faith.
So many good things inside of my family that were broken before, and I was like, okay, that nothing can fix it, but God can, and everyone is healed now, and we're like we just love each other so much again, and I think that's like a thanks to God.
For these students, faith is a personal choice, which engages their whole identity. It is much more than a tradition, hobby, or lifestyle choice. Now we can understand the importance of their religious freedom, which is intrinsically connected to the freedom to express this faith publicly. Now the question is, what is the current state of freedom of speech in their countries and at their universities?
Would you like it to be sort of more open in your workplace setting, to be able to talk just even after the first month or quite soon?
Well, I think it's we live in how do you pronounce this word? Polarized.
Polarized, yeah.
It's very polarized times. Of course, it should be possible to just immediately talk about things, but people just in general speaking, they can't separate one's person from its opinions.
I don't know if it's only for Christians. I think it can also be related to politics, because it seems to be there is an opinion you can have and you can tell.
Have this opinion, follow these set rules, otherwise you're not really a very good person.
Everything which is out of it, out of this box, is harder to say because it won't be listened to.
You can have a political opinion about abstract institutions like marriage, and without thinking that because you have an opinion, then you are against certain persons specifically.
We live in a world where we all share a space, but we don't share the same beliefs.
Probably that's what he was talking about, and I felt we live in a world whereby people don't want to wait and hear your why. They just want to hear what is it, like what do you stand, like where do you stand on this.
It means that every day we are at risk of agreeing with someone and someone not agreeing with us.
I think what you're talking about, people want to know your opinion, not necessarily why,
Yeah.
can be quite linked to things like social media, things like Twitter, the digital sphere, where you have to do a quick fire, this is my thoughts in 140 characters, or whatever it might be.
That's the social media part, and also they're not helping. It's the media who wants to put the certain people, cause of people against the other ones, to the left against the right. There is the interior conviction that if they are against my opinions or they don't agree with my opinions, instinctively you just keep your mouth to avoid problems. And so you think that the other people won't accept your opinion, but actually, once you talk about it, actually people could be just accepting for your opinion and respect your opinion more often than you would think.
Yeah, social media things definitely seems like it just exacerbate that problem, and that's kind of what the algorithms promote. Like the most outrageous things are just emphasized a lot more than they actually are.
I was not sure if I could find like a lot of Christians properly practicing the religion in the West because of how the media portrays it.
And that's not healthy for society. How are you going to work through your difficulties if you aren't open to talk with somebody with a different opinion and willing to be maybe offended by what they're saying or really disliking their opinion? Like, it's still necessary.
Society in general has definitely become less open to controversial views. It's definitely suppressing freedom of speech to some extent, in the form of increased hate speech laws in England especially.
And like hate speech in itself, like there's no proper definition of that.
Exactly.
So no one's quite sure what it actually means.
Yeah.
And like
it's very subjective.
Precisely.
When one wants to express an opinion and find the truth, he has to risk offending someone. We're gonna make expressing an opinion illegal depending on how the way it is perceived.
I don't know. I think the situation is getting bad because if you take away people's voice, I don't know what else they have.
Yeah.
Because voice is one of the most powerful things that we use. It is what nations have used to like rebuild themselves. It is what so many movements were actually built upon. The freedom of speech in the West is not actually practiced as I feel it should be practiced.
What I feel that I can say freely and what I think I should be able to say freely, there's a difference there, and I don't think that should be the case.
It's not just religious people who want freedom of speech. I think for a functioning society, you need to have different voices heard.
It's the thing for Christians, for Muslims, for Jews, atheists, also for politics, I think for right, left, centered. I think that's the topic of freedom of speech. It's not only about religions, but also on every topics in life.
Freedom of expression is recognized as a fundamental human right in Europe, which is a great privilege. Still, some students believe that a polarized social atmosphere, the labeling of certain views as offensive, and the fear of talking about controversial topics are leading to a decline in free speech. How is this situation going to develop? Could these personal stories point towards a form of discrimination? Could this affect the religious freedom of students?
I've been to universities in France, in Germany, and in Luxembourg. During the years, I had some discussions with different people, which were really interesting also for me because they asked me some questions which put me sometimes in difficulties. And so I had to tell them the good vision and the vision of the church, which was sometimes difficult because sometimes I wasn't able to tell it, but also sometimes I disagreed a lot. Even though it was difficult sometimes, I think it was really something that made me richer.
I'm thinking about a case 2017 in the UC Louvain, the French-speaking Catholic University of Leuven, where a professor was fired because he talked with his students about the right to life.
I felt very much like in the academic setting that the university likes to promote freedom of speech and thought and discussion, and this was an academic setting which was actively against what I sincerely held to be true.
I think his way of presenting everything it could have been different, but at the end he's a professor of philosophy presenting an idea, but he was fired. He was immediately suspended and after a couple of months definitely fired. That's the price of non-self-censorship.
It wasn't until like some recent events in university where the topic was like religious inspired in a choreography where I thought like, oh, this is like not so respectful. My classmates that time could see that I was not doing well.
Eventually I managed to find people, even if we disagreed on most things, they could see that I had a right to my belief.
I've seen choreographers using elements like religious songs, like the cross. And art is always been there to communicate, but you always have to be conscious of what you use. Like if you do a piece, you are gonna be careful to which language you use. If you use something from the transgender culture, this is also appropriation from this culture. So then I was like, why when someone used a religious song or a religious symbol, there wasn't any like, oh, be careful that this is a religious symbol.
When you have one hate crime against a mosque or synagogue, it's a big thing. And that's true, that's not normal, that's a thing you should condemn more than it's the case today. But there is a sort of disparity, a gap between the way people react when it's against Christians and the way people react when it's against Jews or against Muslims. Well, you can't say, okay, that's worse in that case because it's against Muslims or it's against Jews or it's against, I don't know, and say then, oh, okay, that's against Christians, but never mind.
That's, if it would be other religions, you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't use another religion's element to make fun of it. In my generation, we're in this safe space kind of like mindset. Goal is to protect every person regardless of sexual orientation, of cultural background, and they even say like of your religion. But when it gets like around people, you still hear hurtful comments about the church and hurtful comments about people from certain groups.
A few weeks ago, a friend of mine invited me for a concert at your church, and she said, okay, that maybe I should help her go around and share some flyers like for the people. So after giving people the flyers and turning away, some of the sarcastic words that I hear them say, like sometimes even while we were giving people the flyers, like the way they actually received it, the way they saw it with like something of disgust, you know, kind of made me wonder, you know.
They always like made me feel so bad about sharing my beliefs, my way to live. Yeah, so I learned over time just to be very careful of like what I was going to say.
It's this kind of thing. I guess it's not seen as an aggression.
Some participants felt that while other religions or groups in our society are treated with respect, this does not always apply to Christianity. This is part of a bigger and complex topic of accommodating religious freedom and freedom of expression within an increasingly secular and plural society. Many of these problems arise due to different political stances. So this is not only about Christians. This is also about respecting different opinions in general. How can we learn to engage in genuine debates again? And how can we overcome the widespread fear of disagreement?
What would be a very encouraging moment if you enter your university? What would be the perfect day?
I would say for myself, just on like a freedom of speech level, just not having to second guess what I say. I want to be able to speak freely with anyone. That's why I would say I'm hesitant to express where I've come from. And just having a completely free exchange, just with the same purpose of trying to arrive at some truth.
There's been lots of problems within the University of Edinburgh in general about freedom of speech.
Speakers with controversial views are discouraged from speaking or even physically stopped.
The university is trying to put stuff in place. They're not really sure yet, I don't think, how they're going to do that. But the university sees it can't go on like this, which has been very encouraging actually to see that even if they disagree with our viewpoint, they agree with our right to hold that viewpoint. So that's been giving me hope.
And also like chasing after truth. Also, I mean, I think it's often the case now that you cannot really express everything like you want to, or like write an exam with your words or your point of views. I think it's more and more the case that you are not really free in that.
So yeah, a lot of my friends who study humanities say, well, if I want to promote my opinion or say what I think in my essays, well, I'm not going to get a good mark. So it's kind of like the correct opinion is being awarded higher intellectual ability or whatever.
There's just one situation which just came to my mind with a friend who once wrote a paper on faith. He brought into his Christian values and things, and the professor just came upon him and said, yeah, I don't like that work.
Which approach would you take to make a change?
I think one of the best things students can do is, just be more courageous about what you want and be outspoken about what you want at university.
As I try to find where my place is, I'll definitely tell them where I'm at and ask their opinion as well. And I find that really enlightening. People are super interesting and it's great to hear their opinions.
I've always had friends from different backgrounds, and I always needed both things.
I had great conversations about faith, and I feel like people have questions all the time.
Definitely have found groups of students who have been really open and are fed up with being not sure about what they can or can't say.
Once you've found a bit of common ground, you can have a discussion.
We could create a surrounding at university like that, like an open discussion which really is not about making you look bad in media or something like that.
I think that's important, like just the atmosphere at universities. Students are coming to university because they want to debate their opinion, because they can strengthen their own stance by, you know, finding out what the other one is.
We only watch the films that we like, the music that we like. For Christians and non-Christians, it's good to see other worldviews so that you can build your own mind and opinion about it.
We all want to know the truth. I think everyone wants to know the truth. It's our way of life.
We're living in a world full of different people, different religions, different cultures. The important thing is to know who you are. And then as soon as you know who you are, then it's so important to be able to discuss with other people.
Challenging our ideas, learning about other views, and trying to understand one another is a step we can all take. And with a society upholding this free exchange of ideas, institutions will hopefully value the protection of freedom of expression even more. Even if self-censorship is already present in some settings, we can rediscover the beauty of genuine free conversations. Our students have some very encouraging thoughts. Whether we talk about faith, politics, or other topics, we can all do our part by practicing tolerance and openness to truly listen to one another.
Really enjoyed like the discussions. I mean, we are from different denominations.
I felt like very comfortable from like the first second.
These few days have been very important psychologically for me personally. When you have to withhold things constantly in your life, you start to really second guess what you believe.
I will say I was censored, yes, more than I was actually aware of. At first I thought it was a personality thing for me, but from the responses and from the conversations, I can say it's more of a general struggle. I think sometimes we also censor ourselves because we care.
I think if people see that what we are doing here and then they look at it and say, oh, okay, that's a discussion surrounding, we should support in our universities as well.
Christians could do a lot to actually change the situation.
Should be able to listen to the other side and accept that that is their opinion.
There's definitely instances where Christians are very judgmental. Certainly in the UK, you might see people that hold signs on the street that say, if you don't follow us, you're going to hell, which I don't think is helpful for anyone.
We need to be able to call out situations or call out people that we feel sometimes take advantage of Christianity as it is to be able to get vote. They may not properly represent what we actually stand for.
And it's not the reality of most Christians, so I think Christians who have a charitable method and outlook on life need to encourage their voices to be heard in a wider sphere.
I think we just took one step further to reaching that goal, and that's what really encouraged me.
Same so. Yeah.
These few days have been personally very helpful to actually talk about my experience and my views and reflect upon them and understand them better.
George Orwell, he said, if liberty is anything, it's the right to tell people what they don't want to hear. And I think that's an important concept and it sums it up quite well.
Make sure you speak the truth as it is. Make sure you speak it in love, but it is okay because now I know that it's like more of a common struggle for us all.